Hello and welcome to the EMBA 7341 class, or the online version of 7341, which is Emotional Intelligence in the Workplace. I'm Dr. Brian Forsyth, and I am just trying to give you some information about DISCflex and how this will be worked into the class, and give you some history of it. You'll actually have a DISCflex instrument that you will complete. It will give you readings, it will give you a profile, and it will give you a lot of information about how to practice emotional intelligence in the workplace. So let's get into this, and your instructor, your professor, will help you to make sure you have access to the instrument, and there will be exercises in the class that will help you to refine your skills utilizing the DISCflex. So I'll show you how it relates to emotional intelligence in this class, in this session. A couple of colleagues and myself actually published an article. It's in the Journal of Organizational Psychology, and it is completely related to this. It is all about this. There will be access to this article. It's not in the course, but I will certainly provide it myself for you to read, and or whoever else might be teaching the course will also have access to the article to share with you. Or you can look it up yourself in the in ProQuest, in the library database. It's in there. And this is just a picture of the journal we're doing here today. This is the cover of the instrument. The behavioral report, behavioral business report, I believe, is the one we'll be using in class here. This is a leadership report. So there are many different reports, and they all tell you different things. So there's one for interviewing, there's one for teams. I don't know how many there are. There are probably, they even have reports that are helping people with addiction now. So lots of different kinds of reports. You're going to get a shorter version in the course. The longer version that I took here a couple of years ago now gives me like 30 pages of information about all kinds of things related to my career choices and my leadership styles, and so on and so forth. This is all based on the DISC profile. So if you're familiar with DISC, which we'll look at here what that means in a moment, then this is a version of that that allows you to flex your muscles, so to speak, your intellectual, your not intellectual, but your emotional intelligence type muscles in the workplace. That's the goal. And it also applies at home as well. It can apply in both areas, with your friends, wherever. So this is the beginning. These are the theoretical foundations leading to DISCflex. Like I said, it started with DISC. DISC started with the 4 quadrants model originating in ancient Greece. So all this goes way back to at least 400 BC. The first 4 elements that were considered in this instrument, in this area, in this arena, were consciousness, emotion, intelligence, and wisdom. And then Marston in 1928 came up with these theoretical underpinnings in emotions of normal people, which was, I believe, a white paper. I'm not sure. But then Jung and Freud in Munich ultimately led to the Myers-Briggs type indicator, which you've probably been exposed to at one point or another, I imagine. The Myers-Briggs has been around a long time, as has the DISC, as has the Berkman colors, as has many personality type inventories. And So this should be familiar with to you, I would imagine, in some way. You've probably taken one of these at one point or another. However, the DISCflex is a different animal, and so there's some postulated theories here. Davis and Clausen posited that belief that behavior is measurable only as a snapshot with the evolutionary ability for human beings to flex their behaviors taking greater importance. It is through comprehensive and practical knowledge or feedback provided in e-learning that helps reduce the strain of behavioral flexibility so one can adapt their responses to meet their desired outcomes. So basically, we're going to get into here in this presentation the idea or the notion of flexing your behaviors to draw in the people, the crowd, the different types of personalities that you're dealing with to help create better relations, etc., etc., etc. The DISCflex instrument measures an individual's behavior at a current moment in time. The theory is postulated that behavior is always in continual flux between the different spheres of your life, work, family, and social. And thus, some personality assessments do a disservice by stating that an individual's values and personal identity are fixed. Humans are simply too complex to adequately measure their actions based on biological or experiential predispositions. And Davis is one of the founders of a company that started this whole DISCflex thing. So Clausen is a scientist that she was working with. And I've seen evidence of this actually in my own profiles. So this is something I've experienced. So what does DISCflex consist of here? And this also, what I really like here is the colors that have been added. The original disc had no color. The Berkman colors that I've been certified to teach and work with a long time ago had colors, which I really liked the colors aspect of it. And so DISCflex has included these colors to obviously speak to the different types of folks here, or profiles, if you will. So the DISCflex patterns reveal the peaks and valleys of the landscape of a person's behavioral tendencies. The most important thing to understand is the relationships between the four factors, which we'll look at more closely here. And those are dominance, D for dominance, I for influence, S for steadiness, and C for compliance, DISC for short, right? The elevation between the individual factors creates a spread. This spread will govern the behavioral choices that people make. This is also referred to in some circles as emotional intelligence. Now this is interesting. I've found this over the years. I've taken the DISC a number of times, and Myers-Briggs and all the others. And what I saw was, now that I'm getting older, my profile has changed. And you'll see that the D is low, which is dominance, lower, not real low, but lower. The I is the highest. The S for steadiness is next, and then C for compliance is the lowest, which has always been the way it is for me. I'm a non-compliant person most of the time if it doesn't make any sense, especially. But anyhow, used to be the opposite. The S used to be down by the C, and the D used to be up by the I. So when I was younger, I was more dominant and influential. And steadiness, the risk reduction and those sorts of things were less important to me. So I've seen a shift. Now that I'm older, I'm more strategic, I'm more conscious of things in my life that could, be risky or whatever. So I'm more steady and I'm less dominant as I get older. So that was So what does it mean? Well, we can see the colors here, beautiful colors. Steadiness is what I said. I just told you I raised my steadiness level over the years. More of an introvert, which I won't completely agree with, and you don't have to agree with everything here either. It's just a generalization of sorts that can be challenged, and most of it will ring true. Some of it may not. It all depends on your situation. Like I said, which situation you're using this in, and how you feel on a certain day. There can be a number of things that can have small impacts on all this. But steadiness means that you're loyal and you're calming and you like the status quo, which of course makes sense with steadiness. Compliance are facts and details, practical and rules driven. This is what drives me crazy. To me, rules are made to be broken, right? Now, if they make sense or you have to comply with them, well, then that's another story. The D for dominance is driven, determined, and competitive. So red is a very good color for dominance. It's like a bull in a china shop. And influence is blue, which is one of my favorite colors. Open, friendly, and emotionally based. So I was really high in the S and the I. These were lower, the compliance and dominance. So this says extrovert and introvert, so I guess I'm a mix. When I'm alone, I like to be alone a lot of the times. I like to meditate. I like to, contemplate and those sorts of things, which is more of my S, I guess. And I have my moments like teaching a course or doing a speech or whatever, where I'm a lot more I, open, friendly, emotionally based, social, and extrovert, right? So on the bottom we have social and extrovert for influence, task oriented and extrovert for D. We have introvert and task oriented for compliance, and we have introvert and social for S. So both of mine, the high ones, are social, which makes sense because I'm a very social person. And maybe you're the opposite. Maybe you're non-social, you're very compliance and dominating type of person. You could have a lot of different mixes. So here's an in-depth look, and I won't get into all of these because it gets into detail on all of these different combinations. So I'll just try to explain this, and you can review some of this later with your instructor or what have you. So we have a D and I. We have a high D and a low I, right? Little I, lowercase. And on the opposite side, we have a high I and a lowercase d, uppercase, lowercase. So this is a continuum from left to right. And what we're saying is if we're extreme high on the D and I on this side, we're more efficient. If we're the opposite, we're more friendly. And there can be gradients, there can be ranges between both. You could be in the middle on both. And ideally, you probably would be in the middle on all of it. The whole goal here is to be aware of it, number one, and to be able to utilize these skills in a way that makes sense in whatever situation you're in. So, the high D and the low C compliance might mean independence. High C, low D might mean cooperativeness. So the compliance is higher there, and they're more cooperative and will do what they're told. Anyway, so all of these things, these aspects or character traits here are related to emotional intelligence. So this is where emotional intelligence and the DISCflex start to unite. So here we have some more depth. Actually, this takes you into more depth on the high D and the low I. When dominance is greater than influence, you have this shows up, and its efficiency is the sub factor. That means you tend to be more direct and assertive, You finish work very quickly. You rarely or never miss deadlines and may appear willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done. And then on the other side, you love communication. You're an extrovert. You're good at making small talk and get along well with others. And you can see on this continuum, again, this arrow, it even breaks it down here. And if you're up on the very top, then you're rushed with tunnel vision, probably efficient. And then as you go down, you're laser focused or unsocial or direct or assertive, performance driven, productive, effective communication, social. You'll see it changes in direction with the arrow, right? And then you get down to friendly and passive leadership or insecurity on the bottom if you're high I and low D. So this gets pretty deep, and it continues to get deeper as we go along, but I'm not going to go into all that depth. I just want you to have an idea of. So I'm going to flip through a couple of slides here because it just gets into the muck, if you will, of how this thing can work. I understand that there's a lot of depth. And you can do with this, and you're completely emotionally intelligent, as we say in this course. This is what the course is about: emotional intelligence in the workplace. These are the kind of things that matter. Okay, so we have a nice, beautiful colored picture here of dialing up and dialing down. So what does this mean? Well, this means that this is what we do. If we know that we are, let's say, red, we're highly red, highly dominant, and we're going in to meet with a bunch of people who are highly compliant, then we might want to dial up our C, right? So as a red, we might want to change some of this, and all this, watch the leader, try something new, take a time out, listen to others, whatever, all the red aspects, and think about the yellow. If this is a highly yellow group, like accountants, let's say, who are deep into compliance, or whoever might be rule bound, then you might want to dial up your compliance factors. So you might want to refer to instructions or ask an expert or perceived expert, outline the boundaries, plan a major project, create appropriate quality standards, know the guidelines, structure your day, and prioritize your tasks. So you might want to go in there and talk like with that language, if you will. If, let's say I'm a high C and I'm going in to talk to some high D's, then I might want to dial up my D, right? Or my I or my S accordingly. Now, if I'm a high D, or a high D, and I'm trying to work with other people in general, then I might want to dial down some of my usual behaviors and dial up some of the behaviors that are exhibited typically with the C. So if I'm a high C, I might want to dial down some of my behaviors that I typically exhibit and dial up whatever matters to the groups that I'm going in to see. So let's say high I, is more salespeople and people that present and so on. So if I'm a high, typically a high C, and I'm going into a high I group, then I might want to practice public speaking, become more convincing, get others' opinions, talk to people, and so on and so forth, right? And maybe think about dialing down some of the things that I typically do, like speak up, right? Or be creative, those sorts of things. So let's see here. So hopefully that helps a little bit, dialing up and dialing down, depending on your behaviors and whoever the type of group that you're going in to work with, or individuals. If you know the profiles of individuals, you might want to dial up your C or your S or your I to be able to communicate effectively with those people. There's also a team behavior report, which would be very helpful if you're going in to see it. Let's say the whole company has done these profiles, and you have access to them, and you know if you go into a certain group of people, accounting, sales, finance, manufacturing, let's say the president's executive team, whatever. You could see a lot of things that the team exhibits, and maybe this will help a lot and maybe it won't. But if you see that, let's say you have a lot of D's, high D's, and let's say it's the executive team, well, you definitely want to dial up your D, and you want to be a higher D. You want to communicate with them in short, succinct facts and bullet points and all that sort of thing, right? The other thing, though, that you can do with this is figure out who's on your team. If you're a team leader, which is where this really becomes important, you can figure out what kind of profiles you have on your team. And so if we can say, okay, whoever sample one is, I don't know, they probably have names on them. But in this instance, we have one high D, right? And out of these 4 people. So let's say we are going to have a presentation with these executives, and somebody needs to give this presentation. Well, who am I going to ask to give this presentation? I'm going to ask my high D and my high I. This person right here should be very successful in giving this presentation. If I'm looking for ideas on strategy or what have you, I might talk to the S and get more out of them. And this person here could be instrumental in a certain situation. The high C, if you have to create a checklist or a policy or something, then they might be handy for that. And it's always good, as I'm sure you've heard in the past, to have a nice mix of people in your group. It's always good to have and know how to utilize their strengths. That's the whole idea. And there's also an infinity diagram that can be useful, scatter plot. It depends on how you like to look. So how does the DISCflex and emotional intelligence relate? And DISCflex leads to a self-awareness, which is the beginning or the first half of emotional intelligence, known as intrapersonal intelligence. The other half being interpersonal intelligence. So this comes from the 8 different types of intelligence, or multiple intelligences, if you will, that Howard Gardner put together back in the 80s. So 2 of the 8 types of intelligence are intrapersonal and interpersonal, and they make up emotional intelligence. Now the idea here is that you work on yourself intrapersonally first before you start heading out and working with other people on the interpersonal aspects of things. And this helps with the intrapersonal, what we're doing now. Third-party reflection is a possibility. With this instrument, you can have other people rate you as well, which is a nice thing to do in many situations, to get feedback from others, because you might see yourself one way and they might see you another way. It's like doing a 360-degree evaluation on your leaders and so on. Through flexing and morphing, you can work to adapt as necessary to any situation to work toward the best interests of all parties involved, working the interpersonal side. So this is the terms flexing and morphing are very interesting terms, and we'll learn more about those as we go along. But flexing is what I talked about with dialing up and dialing down your behaviors based on who you're dealing with. And morphing is basically when you get to the place where it becomes second nature and you just do it. It's not difficult. It becomes part of who you are. And maybe you're a lot like that already. And a lot of you may be. And that's great. That just makes this all the more easy for you. And sometimes when you see things like this, it just helps make sense of things. You kind of know this, but you can't put the pieces together, and this may help you put those pieces together to understand the whole, and not just parts of the whole. So the team report allows for anyone to be aware of the other's patterns and to prepare to engage with people where they are at in their world. And this leads to increased interpersonal skills, which is the other half of emotional intelligence. So as I said with the team report, you can use those profiles to help you to decide as a team leader how to best utilize your talent on your team. And now we take it a step further, and in the paper it describes this. This is from the journal article that I helped to write, or I mostly wrote. But emotional intelligence then leads to job performance. So the higher the level of emotional intelligence, the higher the level of job performance. And a lot of the studies that have been done, which are hundreds of studies, all kind of say the same thing, that people that are the leaders, especially leadership, that have high levels of emotional intelligence are typically the best leaders, especially when we're talking about global leadership, which is a whole nother topic at a higher level. I just did a chat the other day on that very topic, and we get into cultural intelligence. So we have emotional intelligence, we have IQ in the bottom, basically, intellectual quotient, and then we have emotional intelligence, or EQ. Then we have CQ, which is cultural intelligence, and now we have SQ, which is spiritual intelligence. And I'm finishing a book on that right now. And so it keeps evolving, like most things in the business world and so on. Emotional intelligence consists, like I said, of intra and interpersonal intelligences. A study found significant relationships between emotional intelligence and job satisfaction and performance, specifically in the areas of self-motivation and awareness, self-regulation, and relating to another person's experience, or while introducing new ideas in a situation or team setting. For any top executive or leadership role, there are never more than two competencies that come out of the cognitive area, IQ, as distinguishing outstanding performance. Those tend to be systems thinking and pattern recognition, which are IQ functions. All the rest are what we call emotional intelligence. There are significant relationships between emotional intelligence, job satisfaction, and performance. And so employees with higher levels of emotional intelligence skills will be able to appraise, control, and regulate their emotions, leading to more influence on behavior and outcomes of the situations they are in. So think about this. When you're with somebody, talking to somebody, and they can relate to you and they can be on your level wherever that is, and they care about you, and they listen to you, and all these other things that are involved, you feel more comfortable, don't you? So if you feel more comfortable, logically, you're going to have a better relationship, and you're going to get more things done. So that's kind of the whole idea in a nutshell. So in conclusion on this, there's an absolute correlation between the DISCflex instrument and the earlier version of the DISC profile, which has been validated and proven reliable for more than 50 years. So there's a lot of validation on this whole DISC idea. Many empirical studies have demonstrated the relationship between successful leadership and the use of emotional intelligence skills, which leads to one's performance, which I mentioned earlier. And there is empirical evidence of a significant relationship between emotional intelligence and job satisfaction and performance. Hence, one can logically draw the conclusion that if DISCflex develops emotional intelligence, then it also leads one to a place of higher job satisfaction and job performance. We're using some logic there, right? So this is the DISCflex leadership team performance model. And basically it aligns with a lot of change management models that are out there. It just is particular to DISCflex and what you would do with this instrument in the workplace. So you collect baseline data on leadership team performance, the current state of things, baseline. Take the DISCflex leadership team report instrument and study the results and train. So without training, without action, and without doing this and practicing this, there is no purpose, right? You might as well just, it doesn't do a thing for you. So you have to train, you have to try, you have to morph and do all those things that we're talking about as you go along. And then others review you with DISCflex leadership team instrument. If you really want to get into this and be really good at this, which can make you a top leader, then you have others review you as well, which is an option with the instrument when you use it. Improve your morphing skills. So like I said, at first you start to try and flex, and eventually you start morphing, and you just become what you need to become. So that's why we have the butterfly here, right? You just turn into the butterfly where you can morph on a dime, if you will, and just change like a chameleon. They say chameleon on a rainbow is the term they use at this company that provides this instrument. A chameleon on a rainbow, that's morphing. Continuous morphing with all involved back and forth. And so ideally everybody's tuned in on this, right? And everybody's using these skills. And then continuously monitor the emotional intelligence and leadership team performance to see from your baseline what you've gathered and what has happened and what's changed, and move to new areas or teams as needed. So it's like any other change kind of program. You start with the areas you think need it the most and where it's most important, and then you work to the next important and the next important, and so on and so forth. And this is just a diagram that I put together. You know, people that most management people are math challenged, so we typically like to make an equation out of something. So taking DISCflex leadership instrument and the team reports plus application and morphing equals emotional intelligence and leadership team performance. And these are all the same things we just covered. So the vision that I have with all of this is my vision, is that the vision that would accompany this model would follow to partner with passionate leaders that desire to have the insight around and practice what it takes to bring people together to achieve the most that can be achieved with any given group of people or team in any given situation for any worthwhile purpose. So in my idea of how this can work and should work, it's important that you're working with people who understand this, who get this, who want to do this, and not try to force this on anybody who could care less. I mean, that's just banging your head against the wall. And hopefully in this class, we're going to convince you that this is a good way to go and get you to practice some of these skills as much as we possibly can in the workplace. So lastly, when dealing with people, let us remember we are not dealing with creatures of logic. We are dealing with creatures of emotion, creatures bristling with prejudices and motivated by pride and vanity. So this is from Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And we're not dealing with creatures of logic typically. We're dealing with creatures of emotion, creatures bristling with prejudices and motivated by pride and vanity. So if we can think about all these things we're talking about and learn them and be able to morph over time, then that's the goal. And here are the references, and I hope that this short clip or this short PowerPoint presentation helps you to get some understanding of what we're doing with the DISCflex and why we're doing it. And if you have questions, of course, always reach out to myself, Dr. Forsyth, or your current instructor, and we will certainly help you in any way that we can, as always, right? So thank you and take care.